Hello, thank you for joining me here today. Hopefully you are someone who wants to understand more about electricity markets or how to use Benford's law, but thank you for tuning in to watch my video. Today I'm going to be explaining what Benford's law is, its application in the business world and data science world, and how we can also apply it to historical clearing prices for capacity using ERCOT data within the energy sector. So, without further ado, let's begin. So our data source today is ERCOT, the Energy Reliability Council of Texas, and their DAM clearing prices for capacity. So I'm going to demonstrate how using Benford's law is going to be able to plot the distribution and the probability distribution that Benford's law must succumb to, and what that means for electricity markets and what that means for our data set. So first, Benford's analysis is usable in any naturally occurring data set. And it's actually a great way to test whether your data set is naturally occurring or not, which becomes very important if you're running regression, which requires a lot of assumptions to make when you're performing linear or nonlinear regression analysis. But that's a whole different video. I promise I will get into it. Before we start, Benford was a physicist who found that there is a natural probability distribution of the first digit of any naturally occurring data set from digit 1 through 9. And so as this image right here describes, we should see the first digit appear 30% of the time. And for the next digit, 2, we should see it at least 17.6% of the time, and so on. Its importance and implication is two things. One, we can use this to detect whether our data set is naturally occurring or not, which is very important for data science and data analysis in whatever you're doing. And two, we can also use this to detect fraud or anomalies in what we should be expecting to see. For example, this is actually a common technique I used when I was analyzing financial accounts for the city of Corpus Christi. We would have a cash count or for our daily reconciliation for the month, and we would take that and we would see thousands of transaction data as people coming in to pay bills, and the transaction between the person accepting and the person giving and paying the bill, etc. And typically what we would see is it follow this distribution, which is what we should see for normal transaction price data. Now, for example, although I personally have not seen it, but if we were to see a higher distribution above 4.6, let's say we were to see it reach a level of roughly 20%, that would trigger detection, which means that we would see that there's fraud occurring in this 9th digit, which means the entire 500 observations or more we're seeing an anomaly with the distribution and the frequency for the probability of the 9th digit within our data set. Therefore, we can conclude that there may be some manipulation at hand, and we can audit specifically any value that starts with the first digit of 9. So if you have millions of rows of naturally occurring data, let's say transaction data, it's impossible to be able to detect fraud on every single transaction, but through this Benford's law of analysis, we can actually identify anomalies in data sets. So now that you have a good introduction, let us apply Benford's law to our 2023 historical DAM clearing prices for capacity, and let's see if it does follow the normal distribution. So first, we're going to import the data set I've already downloaded. We'll just get it from a Power Query real quick. Excel workbook, and let's see. Oh, my apologies. It was a CSV. Get data from the CSV. Okay. Let's see. We have the delivery dates, the hours. Okay, 24-hour period. That's good. Repeated hours. Okay, all this is fine. We don't really need to transform any of this data, so we're just going to go ahead and load it. And I always like to keep everything organized. So I'm going to label it data. Okay. So for our data, we have the date right here up to the 24th hour and prices. Okay, so we're just going to do a general sum of prices so that we can apply Benford's law. And yes, you can do this individually for every separate price. We're just going to do a general summation so that we can understand it on a more abstract level. So we're going to go ahead and sum these prices. Okay, and we have generated all the prices for every single hour. Okay. Next, we're going to do a left function, or essentially, we're going to find the first digit. And to do that, we're going to use a left function in Excel to identify the left cell and grab the first digit, which is exactly what we have. We have 9, 5, 5, and 6. That's exactly what we're saying. 9, 5, 5, 6. I always like to just verify to make sure everything is what we're expecting. So, next, we're going to create a small table so that we can analyze the data in a more simple way for viewing. So first, we're going to have the digit. Then we're going to have the frequency. Then we're going to have the probability of frequency. And I'll explain all of this later. And then we're also going to have Benford. So we have digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, exactly what Benford. It's the first digits between 1 through 9 because it works and operates under the logarithmic function of the first digits, the natural logarithm, suppressing the e constant. That's the more mathematical side of it. But for this purposes, we're going to run a count if. Whoops. We're going to do a count if function. So it's going to count this data range we have if it is equal to the first digit. So it counted that within this data range, the first digit, 1, for example, it went through and it caught, okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We have a frequency of 2,440. And we're going to go ahead and drag that down. We're also going to create a total, and we'll sum all of this in order to get our probability in the future. Here we go. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to take the frequency we see in the first digit divided by, divided by our total. And we're also just going to anchor it so we can drag it for simplicity. And we're also going to sum all this because I always verify my data whenever I'm doing anything, and it equals 1, which is exactly what we want to see. So we're going to turn this into a percentage, and just for ease, we're going to go to the second decimal place. So we can already see this is pretty much modeling what we would see in Benford's analysis right here. See, it's already pretty close. Now, I'm also going to input Benford's numbers, which is 30.1, 17.6, 12.5, 9.7, 9, 6.7, 4.8, 5.1, and 4.6. Whoops. My apologies. Okay. Yeah, just paste the values. There we go. Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to distribute and plot this. So we have the digits and the frequency of what we're specifically measuring. And let's look. So as we can see, it actually follows Benford's law fairly well. Which is what we would typically see. Now, let's also map it with Benford's law. Insert. There we go. Now we can clearly see the frequency of what we're looking at versus the frequency of what Benford calculated is actually fairly similar in this curve that we're noticing. And of course, we can do some other things like add a trend line or whatever we might want to do. But just for the ease of understanding, we can see that roughly, if anything falls in between this 5% deviation, it's considered okay. And it's fine, typically. There's no real rule to this. It's more consistency in what you're seeing and more about you knowing the data set itself. But we can see that the digit of 2 and 3 is not within 5%, but 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are very, very close. So 2 seems to be the biggest anomaly. Now, this doesn't mean that there's fraud or there's data manipulation by any means. Not every data set is perfect, but if we see extremely large deviations, that's something we need to look at when we're analyzing our data. But most importantly, since this follows the general curvature of Benford's law, we can say with a high probability that this data set is 1, naturally occurring, 2, there's not a whole lot of data manipulation we're seeing, if really any, and you can test for that, but that's beyond the scope of what we're doing now. And third, it's just a way to understand what digits we can identify specifically that also have a high impact within our data set. For example, we see that there's some correlation between the time of day and the price within our second digit. And in further analysis, we can really analyze that, and knowing that, we can see perhaps that's intermediate or peak loads is what we're seeing. And one is more based on average, and we can go far more in depth, but for the scope of what we're understanding here, hopefully you see Benford's law application into the electricity market. We looked at how Benford's law can analyze the historical DAM clearing prices for capacity, how it can be used to detect fraud, how it can also be used to test on a general and more basic rule whether your data set is naturally occurring, and if there's any manipulation. It can also identify specific patterns and numbers where there's irregularities that should be studied more closely. For example, we saw in our example that there's a higher irregularity in the number 2 in the first digit we were looking. So upon further analysis into the subject, we would want to go back and look at what specific data has the first digit as 2, which we're going to see as higher prices generally. And what does that mean for both the hour of day and possibly the day of the year? So controlling for, and I'm assuming mostly seasonality, is what we would look at and anticipate under further analysis. But hopefully today you got a really great brief understanding about how Benford's law can work not only in detecting fraud or data manipulation, but also for data science applications and its overall applied use that can be used in energy markets and energy data sets. So please comment if you have any more suggestions or comments you want to make. I'm going to be posting more videos on topics like this. And yes, you can do this in Python. You can do it in any statistical language or just really any coding language. I wanted to show you my skill in Excel, although you can do many more things than what I've done here. But it's just a good brief overview into a beautiful, beautiful law of mathematical proof. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please contact me if you'd like to know more. Thank you. Bye-bye.